The coffin maker of Harlan Spur did not open his shop before noon. Everyone in town knew that. So when the quiet woman in the gray duster walked through his door at 8:30 in the morning, set $2 silver on his workbench without a word, and told him to keep his saw sharp until sundown, the whole town heard about it before 10. She had ridden into Harlan Spur just after dawn, when the rail yard was still breathing steam from the night freight, and the depot lamps had not yet been extinguished. Nothing about her announced herself. No silver on her saddle. No dramatic pause at the town line. She simply studied the street, the way a carpenter studies a wall before deciding where to drive the first nail, and began. A town that has forgotten what justice looks like does not need a speech. It needs a demonstration. Harlan Spur sat along the Kansas-Colorado line where the railroad had driven a spur track west to serve the freight contracts of the High Plains ranches. It was not a cowboy town in the old sense. There were no cattle pens along the main street, no longhorn smell drifting through the saloon doors. Instead, there were crates, telegraph lines, a water tower that fed the steam engines, a depot hotel 3 stories high, a warehouse long enough to hold a winter's worth of dry goods, and a small collection of businesses that survived entirely because the trains stopped there. The Caldwell family had understood before anyone else that whoever controlled freight access on a railroad spur controlled everything touching it. Amos Caldwell was 61 years old, silver-haired, slow-spoken, and dressed like a territorial judge. He owned the largest cattle operation north of the Arkansas River. He did not shout. He did not threaten in language anyone could later repeat. He simply made arrangements, and those arrangements, over 7 years, had settled like stone on the town. His older son, Burl, was 34, heavy through the shoulders, with a habit of standing too close to men when he spoke to them. He enjoyed the physical fact of himself. He enjoyed the way room temperatures seemed to drop when he walked in. His younger son, Reed, was 29. He was lean, quiet, and smiled at the precise moments when smiling was most unsettling. Reed read people the way some men read contracts, looking for what was left out rather than what was written. The town had a sheriff. His name was Walt Gruber, and 6 years ago he had been a decent man. He still was, in the way that a man can be decent and still do nothing. His wife was unwell. His son was 17 and worked at the warehouse Amos Caldwell quietly owned. Walt Gruber's silence was not purchased. It was simply the shape that fear had pressed him into over time. The one thing Amos Caldwell had not yet managed to take was the water contract. Margaret Fenn, 53 years old, owned the Harlan Spur Depot Hotel, and, through a federal land grant her late husband had secured, the legal deed to the spring that fed the rail tower. Without her water, the trains could not stop. Without the trains stopping, Caldwell's freight contracts, his entire commercial empire, would have to reroute 80 miles south. He had been asking her to sell for 2 years. For 2 years, she had refused. The week before the woman in the gray duster rode in, Reed Caldwell had visited Margaret Fenn's hotel office and informed her, pleasantly, that her deed paperwork contained an irregularity and that unless she signed a transfer agreement before Friday, the county recorder would be obliged to investigate the original grant. He had set a folded document on her desk, smiled in his particular way, and walked out. Margaret Fenn had not slept since. The woman took a room on the 2nd floor of the Depot Hotel. She paid 3 days in advance, which was unusual. She asked the desk clerk, a boy of about 16 named Chet, 2 questions before going upstairs. Which window faced the freight platform, and at what hour did the noon train arrive? Chet told her the south-facing room had the platform view, and the noon express came through at 12:40. She nodded, as though filing the information away, which she was. At breakfast in the hotel dining room, she took the corner table with her back to the wall. Burl Caldwell's chair sat empty at the center table, the best table, closest to the window, and when she sat down in it without hesitation, the entire room went still. Chet appeared at her elbow almost immediately, his face a study in careful neutrality. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that particular table is set," she said, examining the menu card. "I can see that. It's Mr. Caldwell's." "Does he own the hotel?" A pause. "No, ma'am." "Then bring coffee." She ate without hurry. She watched the room in the window's reflection. She counted the men who glanced at the door. She noted the railroad clerk who stopped eating entirely and fixed his eyes on his plate. She noted the freighter at the far table who had the look of a man calculating odds. Burl Caldwell arrived at 7:30. He filled the doorway in the way he intended to fill doorways. His two ranch hands remained outside on the boardwalk. He walked to the center table, looked at the woman in the gray duster occupying his chair, and stood with the particular stillness of a man deciding how much force to apply. "You're in my seat," he said. She looked up from her coffee. She studied him for a moment, the way one studies an unfamiliar piece of terrain. "There are 4 other tables," she said. The room held its breath. Burl's neck reddened above his collar. He was accustomed to the pause before people moved. He was not accustomed to the pause being followed by nothing. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "Yes," she said. She looked back at her coffee. "Sit somewhere else." The silence that followed lasted perhaps 4 seconds. It was the longest 4 seconds Harlan Spur had experienced in years. Burl Caldwell stood in the center of the room with his hands loose at his sides, and something behind his eyes ran a calculation and arrived at an answer he did not like. He was large. She was not visibly alarmed. That arithmetic, for once, did not resolve in his favor. He sat at another table. He sat there with his back straight and his jaw set, eating nothing, staring at the wall, while she finished her coffee without looking at him again. When she left, she nodded to the boy Chet on the way out. The room, behind her, exhaled like a punctured lung. She walked directly to the coffin maker's shop. She set 2 silver dollars on the workbench. The coffin maker, a thin, deliberate man named Aldous, looked at the coins, then at her. "Keep your saw sharp until sundown," she said. "You may be finishing pine boxes by lamplight." Aldous said nothing for a moment. Then, "How many?" She considered it. "Depends how wise certain men are." She walked out into the morning light. By 9 o'clock, the story had traveled from the coffin shop to the mercantile to the telegraph office to the depot platform. By 9:30, it had reached Reed Caldwell, who was drinking coffee in the station office, and who, upon hearing it, set his cup down very carefully and did not speak for some time. Margaret Fenn found the woman in the gray duster on the depot platform, watching a freight crew unload timber. The hotel keeper was a broad-shouldered woman with careful eyes and the specific exhaustion of someone who had been afraid for a week without permission to show it. "You sat in Burl's chair," Margaret said. "I was hungry." Margaret studied her for a moment. "Reed is the one to worry about." "I know. He's already sent a rider to the county seat." "I know that too." The woman glanced at her. "Is your water deed original or certified copy?" "Original. In my office safe." "Good. Keep it there." She spent the rest of the morning learning the town the way a surgeon learns a patient before operating. Not from the outside, but from every angle at once. She walked the length of the freight platform first. It ran east to west, 40 yards of heavy planking, with stacked crates at the eastern end creating a natural blind. The rail line curved slightly coming in from the east, which meant a train arriving at noon would produce 30 seconds of steam and noise and disrupted sight lines before it cleared the platform. She stood at the western end and measured the angle to the warehouse lane. She walked it, 62 paces. The warehouse itself backed up to a narrow alley between it and the livery. The alley was wide enough for a single horse moving carefully. The livery had a rear exit onto the open ground behind town, which connected through a gap in the fence line to the back of the depot hotel. She walked all of it. She counted steps. The water tower stood at the north end of the rail yard on a timber scaffold 26 feet high. There was a ladder on the east side. From the platform on top of the tower, a person with good eyes could see every street in Harlan Spur, every rooftop, and the approach road for 2 miles east and 1 mile west. She climbed the ladder, not quickly but without hesitation, and stood up there for 5 minutes, while 2 railroad workers below pretended not to watch her. She came back down and walked to the telegraph office. The operator was a young man named Doyle, sharp-faced and nervous, with ink-stained fingers and the particular vigilance of someone who had been told to be careful about what he transmitted. She leaned against the counter and asked him 3 questions. She asked whether the Caldwell Ranch had a standing arrangement on incoming wire traffic. Doyle hesitated, then nodded. She asked whether the railroad's district superintendent had a scheduled wire time. 3 o'clock, Doyle said quietly. Every Tuesday and Friday. Today is Tuesday, she said. He said nothing. I need you to send a wire, she said. Not for me. For a woman named Margaret Fenn. To the railroad's district land office in Topeka. I will tell you exactly what it says. Doyle looked at the door. If Reed finds out, he will, she said. That's the point. She looked at him steadily. You've been sitting on that key for 2 years doing what you're told. You send this wire and whatever happens after falls on me, not you. I'm not asking you to stand in the street. I'm asking you to do your job. Doyle's jaw worked. He looked at his hands. Tell me the message, he said. She told him. It was precise, factual, and referenced the federal land grant by registration number. It requested a territorial land agent be dispatched to Harlan Spur to verify deed status and examine recent documents filed with the county recorder in the prior 14 days. It was signed in Margaret Fenn's name, which Margaret had already agreed to. Doyle sent it. His hands were steady once he started. She thanked him and walked out. She stopped at the hardware store next. The merchant there, a heavy-set man named Ord, with a careful manner and a good memory for detail, had lived in Harlan Spur for 11 years. She bought nothing. She simply asked him which of the 2 Caldwell sons gave orders to the ranch hands in town and which one the hands actually listened to. Ord polished a hinge on his counter and answered without looking up. They answer to Burl when Burl's watching, but they watch Reed when they think nobody's looking. And when both are present, they wait, Ord said, to see which way Reed moves. She nodded and left the hardware store. The morning was not yet finished, but she had what she needed. She returned to the depot hotel, climbed to her room, and sat in the chair by the south window, watching the freight platform until the 12:40 train arrived. The noon train came in on schedule, breathing steam in long white billows that rolled across the platform and briefly turned the rail yard into something without edges or fixed distances. She watched it from her window and timed the obscurement. 31 seconds before the platform was clearly visible again, she noted it. At 1 o'clock, she went downstairs and found Sheriff Walt Gruber eating alone at the far end of the hotel dining room. She sat across from him without asking. He looked at her the way men look at things they would prefer not to see. How long, she asked, has he been working on that deed? Gruber set down his fork. He seemed to consider denying he knew what she meant, and then decided against the effort. Reed started building the paper case about 4 months ago, he said. He found a surveyor who'd sign an affidavit about the original boundary markers. Paid for, presumably. What was the thing that finally pushed it? She asked. There's always a thing. Gruber was quiet for a moment. The railroad announced an extension survey, new spur being evaluated 15 miles north. If that spur gets built, this stop gets reduced service. Amos needs the water contract signed and locked before the railroad makes any decisions, or the whole value of his freight arrangement here collapses. So the deadline is real. Friday, Gruber said. Reed wants the papers signed before the county recorder's office closes for the weekend. What happens if she doesn't sign? Gruber's eyes moved to his plate. The affidavit gets filed. Her deed gets tied up in a challenge. Months of dispute. She can't operate the hotel without water access, and she can't fight a legal battle, and she can't... He stopped. She's alone, he said. Her brother left last spring. She's been alone. You have decency left, she said. It was not a question. He looked up sharply. I can see it, she said. It's just that fear has been sitting on it for a while. Gruber looked away. I have a boy who works in Caldwell's warehouse. I know. She stood. That changes tonight. He looked up at her. What does that mean? It means tonight your boy doesn't work there anymore. She picked up her hat from the table. And you know it. She paused. Gruber. If I do what I came here to do, the wire I sent this morning brings a territorial land agent here inside 48 hours. What that agent finds when he arrives depends on whether your office has any documentation of its own on the deed dispute. Gruber blinked. My office has whatever you've been afraid to file, she said. File it this afternoon. She walked to the door. Do not wait to see how today ends first. She left him sitting with his coffee going cold. By 2:30, she had done 3 more things. She had spoken to the liveryman and arranged for her horse to be saddled and kept accessible at the rear exit, not the front. She had walked the alley behind the warehouse a second time, this time noting that a freight wagon parked at the alley's north end would create a useful narrowing of the lane. She had climbed to the top of the water tower a second time, this time with the afternoon light behind her, and confirmed that a man standing on the depot platform directly below would be looking into that light from 3 o'clock onward. At 3 o'clock, Reed Caldwell found her. He came to the platform with one ranch hand at his shoulder and the particular ease of a man who has spent the day deciding how to handle a problem. He was not angry. He was resolved, which was different and more dangerous. You sent a wire, he said. Mrs. Fenn sent a wire, she said. I helped with the wording. You should leave Harlan Spur, he said. Today would be wise. She looked at him for a moment. He was watching her hands. She noticed that. Most men watched her face. You're smarter than your brother, she said. You already know how this ends. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear, but a reappraisal. A tightening of whatever calculation he was running. Sundown, he said quietly. Freight platform. I'll be here, she said. He walked away, and she watched him go, tracking the exact angle of his departure, the direction he turned at the end of the platform, the way his ranch hand moved 2 steps behind and to the left. She stood alone on the platform in the late afternoon light. The train from the east would arrive before sundown for the last run of the day. She knew the schedule. She knew the steam timing She knew the alley width and the water tower angle and the lamp positions and the wagon clearances. What she had not known until this moment was that she had been hoping Reed was simply afraid. He was not. He was ready. Good. So was she. The afternoon moved with the particular weight of hours that know they are the last of their kind. The wind came down from the north carrying the smell of dust and iron rail, and Harlan Spur went about its remaining business with the quietness of a town pulling its shutters in. Margaret Fenn locked the hotel office at 4 o'clock and went upstairs. She did not come back down. Doyle at the telegraph office received one incoming wire at 4:30 and read it twice before locking the office and slipping the key under the door of the sheriff's office across the street. Old Aldous at the coffin shop sharpened his saw, looked at the clock, and sharpened it again. Amos Caldwell arrived in town at 5. He came in his private freight wagon, black painted, with 2 outriders, which was his way of demonstrating that he came when he chose to, and not before. He was dressed in a dark broadcloth coat despite the warmth of the day. He went directly to the station office where Reed was waiting, and they spoke for 20 minutes behind a closed door. The station clerk found urgent reasons to be somewhere else. At 5:30, Burl rode in from the East Road with 4 ranch hands, all of them carrying sidearms openly, which was against the municipal ordinance that Walt Gruber had never once enforced. They stationed themselves at points along the main street, 2 at the mouth of the warehouse lane, 1 at the livery entrance, 1 near the rail yard gate. They were placed like pieces on a board, and the board had been arranged by Reed. She observed all of this from the water tower. She had climbed it at 4:45 while the street was briefly empty, and she lay on the platform boards watching Burl's men take their positions. She counted them, 6 total, including Burl. She noted that Reed himself was not yet visible, which told her more than his presence would have. Reed was saving his position. He intended to be somewhere that gave him a particular advantage, and he had not yet revealed where. She came down the ladder at 5:50, quiet and unhurried, and went to the sheriff's office. Gruber was there. He had filed the documents. She could see the copies on his desk, still ink wet, dated and signed. 6 men, she told him. Burl has positioned 4 hands: North Alley entrance, South Alley entrance, livery gate, rail yard access. He'll put himself near the platform. Reed? Gruber asked. Not yet placed. That's the problem. Gruber stood. He was reaching for something in himself that had not been reached for in years. His movement was uncertain, but his direction was not. You can't take 6, he said. I don't intend to take 6, she said. I intend to take the ones that count. She looked at him. The ranch hands are employees. They are standing where they were told to stand because they are paid to. If the men they're standing there for are no longer standing, their calculations will change. Gruber put on his coat. He pinned his badge straight, which she noticed. He had not been wearing it pinned straight all day. I'll walk the platform, he said. Make a visible circuit. Let them see the law present. That's all I need, she said. Visible. Present. That's enough. She checked the loads in her revolver, settled the gun back in its holster, and looked out the office window at the freight platform in the deepening afternoon light. Where do you think Reed is? Gruber asked. The warehouse roof, she said. High position. Western angle. Into the sun. Gruber turned. How do you know? Because it's what I would have chosen, she said. She went out the side door of the sheriff's office and moved through the gap between the mercantile and the postal station to reach the alley behind the warehouse, without crossing any of the positions Burl's men held. The freight wagon, she had noted that afternoon, was still parked at the alley's north end. She pressed along the warehouse wall, moving beneath the loading dock overhang where the shadow fell thick. At the base of the warehouse's exterior ladder, the one used for roof access during repairs, she paused and listened. Above her, subtle, a boot settling on timber. A single creak of weight shifted. Reed was there. She did not climb the ladder. That would announce her arrival in the worst possible way. Instead, she went to the alley's south end, came around the far side of the building, and crossed the last 20 feet to the depot platform at a low, steady pace, using the platform's own angle relative to the warehouse to keep herself out of any direct line Reed might have on the street. The evening train was due at 6:40. It was 6:15 when she walked onto the freight platform. Burl was there. He stood at the platform's center, wide and heavy, with the two ranch hands from the north alley flanking him 10 feet back. He had not expected her from the platform side. His eyes made a quick adjustment, and he covered it with a slow smile that did not reach anywhere near his eyes. "Early," he said. "Easier to see the street from here," she said. She did not stop moving. She walked to the platform's western end, where the stacked freight crates created the blind she had noted that morning, and turned to face east, facing the rail line, facing the direction the train would come from, and facing the particular angle where, if she was correct, Reed's position on the warehouse roof gave him a clear line, which meant she was now behind the crates from his perspective. She heard Burl walk toward her. She heard the two hands move to follow. "Where is your father?" she asked. Burl stopped. The question was not what he expected. "The station office," he said, before he decided not to answer. "He should stay there," she said. Burl's jaw tightened. "You think you're walking away from this? I think you haven't talked to Reed in the past hour," she said. "I think he sent you out here because he needs you somewhere he can see you." She kept her eyes on the eastern rail line. "You're a good brother. He knows you'll move when you're supposed to move. He knows you're reliable." The word reliable landed with a precision she intended. Burl's face reddened. "He's using you as a distraction," she said simply. "He's always been the one running the play." That was when Burl moved, not toward her gun, toward her, which was his nature. He came with his hands rather than his iron, wanting to make it physical, wanting to establish the size differential, wanting to feel himself winning before finishing it. She stepped inside his reach with a movement that was neither dramatic nor rushed, and what happened next was quick and deliberate and final. Burl Caldwell hit the freight platform boards with a sound that rattled the crate stacks, and the two ranch hands behind him froze with the particular paralysis of men who have watched something happen faster than they can process. "Drop them," she said. And they did. From the warehouse roof came a sound. Footsteps fast on timber, Reed repositioning, his plan altered by 3 seconds of information. She vaulted the platform rail. She hit the rail yard gravel at a run, moving north toward the warehouse, and Reed's first shot came from the roof edge, not close, but not far, and correcting as he moved. She had been right about the position, and wrong about one thing. He had a second man up there with him, a ranch hand she had not seen take position, who appeared at the roof's eastern corner with a rifle. 2 angles, 1 open ground. She threw herself behind the water tower's timber base as the second shot struck the scaffold above her head. The evening train whistle sounded in the distance. 2 miles east, maybe less. She was pinned. The train was coming. The scaffold shuddered. She pressed against the base timber and did all of her thinking very fast. Reed was moving along the roof line to close the angle behind the water tower. The rifleman on the east corner was covering the open ground between the tower and the platform. She had perhaps 40 seconds before Reed had a clear shot, regardless of her position. The train's whistle came again. Closer. She looked up. The water tower ladder was on the east side, exposed. But the runoff pipe on the north side ran up the full height of the scaffold in iron brackets, close enough to the timber to climb if the brackets held. She had looked at this pipe that morning and dismissed it as a root because it was exposed. It was still exposed. But Reed was moving west along the roof, not east. For the next 20 seconds, his angle on the north side was blocked by the tower tank itself. She had 20 seconds. She went up the pipe. The brackets held. Her arms burned. She moved without sound, without rushing what could not be rushed, bracket to bracket, while the train's whistle tore the air wide open below her and steam began rolling forward in white walls along the track. She cleared the top of the scaffold as the engine entered the station. The platform vanished in steam. The entire rail yard disappeared into white. She was on top of the water tower, 26 feet above the town, and the world below was a roar and a cloud. Reed was on the warehouse roof 20 feet lower and 30 yards south. He could not see the ground. He could not see the platform. He could not see his brother or his hands. He was blinded, and he knew it, and she could see exactly where he was. She stepped to the edge of the tower platform and looked straight down at him. Reed. The single word cut through the noise with the specific quality of something said from directly above. He spun, looked up, and for the first time since she had arrived in Harlan Spur, Reed Caldwell's face showed the expression he had been careful not to show all day. His platform calculation, the sun angle, the street geometry, the warehouse height advantage, had been precisely engineered for one level. She was 10 feet above his ceiling. He raised his gun. She was already moving, dropping behind the tower tank's iron housing as his shot rang loud and flat across the rail yard and struck the tank above her. Water began to weep from the hole in a thin silver line. The train cleared the station. The steam began to thin. She came around the east side of the tank housing, and Reed was scrambling for the roof ladder, abandoning the advantage of the high position because the high position was no longer his. The rifleman on the east corner had turned toward the tower, rifle tracking, but the steam was still drifting, and his angle was uncertain. She came down the water tower ladder, east side, the exposed side, in one smooth, controlled descent, and she was on the ground and moving before the rifleman had processed where she'd come from. "You're done," she said clearly. He was 10 feet away. He looked at the certainty in her face, which was not the hot certainty of anger, but the cold variety that comes from having already worked through the calculation to the final line. He set the rifle down. Reed came off the warehouse ladder and landed in the alley gravel at a run, not running at her, running for the street, running for his horse, running with the specific quality of a man who understands that the game has changed and the new game requires distance. She was faster. She came around the far warehouse corner before he cleared the alley mouth, and she stepped into his path with enough time for him to stop, which he did. They stood in the alley between the warehouse and the livery, 6 feet apart, in the last orange light of the day falling between the buildings. He still had his gun. His hand was near it, but not on it. "The wire already went," she said. "A territorial land agent is coming. The county recorder will be asked to produce every document filed in the past 30 days. Sheriff Gruber filed his own documentation this afternoon." She paused. "Your surveyor's affidavit will be examined." Reed's jaw moved. That can all be managed. No, she said simply. It can't. Not now. The Topeka office has the deed registration number. They know what to look for. She looked at him without heat or drama. Your father built something real, Reed. The cattle operation, the freight contracts, that's not nothing. But this, what you did to that woman, what you built around her deed, that comes apart today. A long silence. In the street, she could hear Walt Gruber's voice, steady and clear, telling Burl Caldwell's remaining ranch hands to stand down. She could hear them complying, one by one, with the sound of men who had been waiting for permission to stop. Reed looked at his hand near his gun. He looked at the alley entrance. He looked at her. You could ride away from this, he said. It was not quite a threat and not quite a question. So could you, she said, right now, without this. She held his gaze. That's the only offer I have. Reed Caldwell stood in the alley of Harlan Spur as the evening came down around him, and whatever calculation he ran in those 5 seconds ended with his hand moving away from his gun. He walked toward the street, and Sheriff Walt Gruber was there to meet him. Inside the station office, Amos Caldwell had watched all of it through the window, the steam, the tower, the alley. And when Reed was taken and Burl was helped to his feet with his face carrying the evidence of the platform boards, Amos Caldwell simply set his hat on his head and went to find his lawyer, because Amos Caldwell's particular genius had always been knowing when a position was no longer tenable. He did not run. He was not that kind of man. But he left Harlan Spur that evening, and everyone saw him go. The territorial land agent arrived Thursday morning on the eastbound freight train. He examined the deed. He examined the county recorder's recent filings. He examined the surveyor's affidavit, which collapsed under scrutiny within 48 hours when the surveyor in question found his memory improving considerably under official questioning. Margaret Fenn's water deed was confirmed uncontested. Doyle sent 3 more wires that week, all of them on legitimate business, all of them without anyone looking over his shoulder. Walt Gruber's son came home from the warehouse Friday afternoon and did not go back. Aldous the coffin maker finished 2 pine boxes that week. He did not need a third. He closed the second one on Saturday and went home to his supper, and did not think about it further. On Wednesday morning, before the territorial agent's train had even pulled out of the station, the woman in the gray duster settled her hotel bill with Margaret Fenn. Margaret stood in the doorway of the Depot Hotel, watching her saddle her horse at the rear livery exit. You never told me your name, Margaret said. The woman checked the cinch strap. No, she said. Will you come back through? She looked at the rail line running east and west into the flat distance and said nothing for a moment. Towns like this one need to stand on their own, she said. She put her foot in the stirrup. You can. You proved it. She paused. Keep the deed in the safe. She rode east on the railroad into the early morning light and did not look back. And in Harlan Spur, the trains kept running and the water tower kept filling, and the day went on the way days do, when the shape of things has been put right and the person responsible for it has already gone. Margaret Fenn stood in the doorway of the Depot Hotel and watched the gray duster disappear into the distance until the road and the rider became the same color as the morning. Behind her, Chet was setting the dining room tables. Doyle had opened the telegraph office. Walt Gruber was walking the main street with his badge pinned straight, and people were looking at him with something they had misplaced for a long time. She did not know the woman's name. Nobody in Harlan Spur ever would, but they knew what she had done, and they knew the town she had left behind, and those 2 things taken together, were more than enough.